Hello, my name is Zane. I'm glad you're here with us to continue this series about the things that God has taught us. The thing I want to share this morning is about driving. I taught my two youngest boys to drive this past year, and it's taught me so much about God. I realized real quickly that the basics of driving, the shifting the gears, turning the car on, using the blinkers, that's easy. But when you get out on the highway, it's a whole different story. Because out on the highway, there's two other factors that come into play. And one of those is no abrupt steering. And the other one is you have to look far ahead at what's coming. What really made me realize that this could compare to our spiritual walk is when I read Hebrews chapter 12 a couple of months ago. And as I was reading it, I realized that our spiritual walk is just like driving or learning to drive. And I want to share with you those things this morning. Open your Bibles with me to Hebrews chapter 12. And we'll read this passage that I think has great importance to us. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles us. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out before us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. So what the writer of Hebrews is saying is he's calling us to walk spiritually. He's calling us to walk forward. And I think that compares to driving because let me show you. When my kids first started driving on the highway, I had to teach them in the process of them driving is not to make abrupt changes in their driving. To just basically keep it between the lines. And that was done by little bitty shifts on the steering wheel, not drastic shifts. Well, the writer of Hebrews says the same thing. He's saying to the brethren that are receiving this letter, he says that don't try to be like Abraham. Don't try to be like David. Just keep it between the lines and make those tiny adjustments. So the first thing he says, throw away everything that hinders you. The second thing he says is get rid of sin. That's a pretty simple concept because what he's trying to teach us to do is as those things come into our life, we quickly have to leave them aside. I remember when my kids were little and they would help us practice they would help us get ready to travel. They would bring stuff out to pack in their little backpack and they would bring every toy they ever had, but they would put it in and they would go back to get another and I would take it out and put it on the side so that we only had a certain amount of things in their backpack. Because if we kept everything that they brought in, their backpack not only would have to be the size of the Grand Canyon, it would be really heavy. So we had to take those things out. It's like telling a kid who has his shoes untied, tie your shoes, and the kid ignores you. So while he keeps running, eventually those shoestrings are going to trip him up. Well, the writer of Hebrews says, take off those things. Just keep it between the lines. Make the small adjustments in your life. Throw away those things. Don't let them become big things. And don't make those drastic changes. Because if you do that, you'll just keep it on the path that you're supposed to go on. But the other thing is interesting is one of my things I had to teach my kids is that when they're driving, they had to learn where to look. Because when they first started driving, everywhere their head went, the steering wheel turned. Everywhere they looked, they turned. And you can't do that when you're driving 60 miles an hour down the highway. Or they would look right in the front of the car, and it would be hard for them to keep it between the lines. Well, we taught them, or I had to teach them, that when they're looking to drive on the highway, they have to look beyond the car. They have to look beyond where they are, and that will help them keep it between the lines. Because if they will look beyond the car, then the other things they've learned will help it keep it between the lines, but not vice versa. If they look to try to keep it between the lines and look real close, then they lose track of where they're going. Well, Hebrews says the same thing. Hebrews says, look forward, or actually it says, look to Jesus. Consider him. And so if we can learn in our spiritual walk to look beyond today, present, and look to what Jesus did and how Jesus was and what he did, just like he had to do when he was facing the cross, we can realize that it's much easier for us to keep on that path of spirituality that God calls us to do. And so if we'll move forward We have to know where to look, because if we concentrate on today, which sometimes I even have a hard time concentrating on the next minute, because I'm always in my here and now. But Jesus withstood his temptation and the scorn of men because he looked way ahead of where he found himself. So in our spiritual walk, just like driving, we have to learn to look way ahead. We have to look at where we're going. And we have to look at Christ, because that helps us keep us on that spiritual trek. So what am I trying to say? As we learn to drive, and as many of us do now at this point, when we're driving, it's very simple. We keep it between the lines by making small, minute changes in our driving. And also we look far enough ahead so that we know where we're going. Well, your spiritual walk and my spiritual walk are exactly the same. We have to learn to let go of those things. We have to learn to let go of those things and get away from those small things that hinder us, so that they don't build up. And then we have to learn to put our vision and look to where God is and what Jesus is doing in our lives. Because if we will do that, and we'll walk spiritually, God will make out of us heroes of the faith. Keep it between the lines. Keep your eyes on Christ. And God may turn you into an Abraham. Or he may turn you into a David or a Moses. Because all he's asking you to do is drive down the lane, and he'll do the rest. And God bless you.